Taking any time off this summer?
A little bit, some September.
If I could trouble you to shut the door there, we'll get going. I appreciate that very much. Just lift that little latch.
I'll meet the 18th meeting, but then the 19th I leave for Denver. I feel like Rob.
Hi, I'd like to call to order the Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Jack Courier. I serve as the chair. To my right is Mary Ellen McKay, who's our clerk. And then going around the table counterclockwise is Mr. J.P. Boucher, who is our vice chair, and Rob Shaw. To my left is Mr. Carter Falk. He is the deputy planning manager here in Nashua. I know we have only one case, and you're a repeat customer, and you probably know the rules. I'm advised that training, that in case people are looking on TV from new, it would be good to walk through the rules briefly. So if you could bear with me, I'll spend a few minutes just going through that. Again, we only have one case tonight. That case will be heard in two components. The first component will be the public hearing, which is where we hear from you, the applicant, and any other interested parties. The public hearing will consist of, you have up to 15 minutes to present your case. Anybody else speaking in favor will have up to 5 minutes to present their case. If there is any opposition, any of those folks will have up to 5 minutes to present the opposition. We don't have any things submitted to us in favor or opposition other than the application. So if there's no one here to speak in opposition, when your component is done, that will close the public hearing, and then there'll be the public meeting, which is where the four of us will likely come to a decision. And just to tick through the 5 criteria for a variance, number 1 is that the variance will not be contrary to public interest. Number 2 is that the spirit of the ordinance is observed. Number 3 is substantial justice is done. Number 4 is that the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And that number 5, the literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. And again, just being brief, if there's an aggrieved party to whatever decision we have tonight, there is a 30-day window of appeal. I'm sure you've heard me say that many times before, and that clock starts ticking as of tomorrow. And if you wanted to file a rehearing request, which is the next step, you could give Mr. Falk a call. There's a form for that. Let's see, I just wanted to say, I think we could terminate the my presentation with that, and if you don't have any questions, we could get underway. So if you'd like to take it away, and I know you know to say your name and address for the record, so if you could kick off with that, we'd appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board members, for hearing our case tonight. My name is Peter Dolliff. I'm the president of Sequel Development and Management, Inc., 2 Knightsbridge Drive in Nashua, New Hampshire. We have a great project we're presenting to you tonight that we're actually very excited about. And I'll go through some of the details with you. This project is located in an RC zoning district. It is the highest density district per acre in Nashua at 2.5. The housing in this area is all turn-of-the-century buildings that have been broken up into multifamily homes. They're typically very large buildings encompassing nearly the entire lot. The housing stock is aged and oftentimes antiquated in this neighborhood. Our project is to build 9 2-bedroom apartments. The apartments will be what we consider entry-level, priced accordingly apartments. So I think it's a product that this part of town desperately needs, and a product that'll be well accepted. And again, they're going to be rental units as opposed to for sale units. Much, if not most, of the development going on in the Nashua area is now aimed at upper-level rentals. So much of the rental properties being built in Nashua now, such as the stuff down by Exit 1, are all higher-end market type properties, and these, again, will be more for median income type folks. The project is also exciting and is taking place at the same time that the community development is undertaking a major project on Everett Street. The community development, you folks probably know, has received a $500,000 grant and is going to be building a pedestrian bridge over the canal to improve, using Everett Street to connect the rail trail and the Mines Falls Park. So to give you an idea of what we're doing and get into a little bit of detail, we've already purchased the lot here on Stevens and Everett Street, this corner lot that then goes down along Everett Street. What we're proposing is a 9-unit building, 60 by 50 feet. They'll all be 2-bedroom apartments. There'll be laundry facilities within the building. We meet all of the setback requirements. We are providing 14 parking spots, 13.5 are required, so we meet the parking requirements. We exceed the green space. It requires 35% green space, and we're at 45% green space, so we meet that. So the only variance we're looking for here is a density variance. We're looking to put 9 units in as opposed to 5.12, which is what the zoning would allow. So we are looking for that density variance. That does help make the project more affordable, so we can build a quality building and we can rent it at a reasonable rate that'll accommodate the folks in this neighborhood. The other exciting part of this, and which benefits the city greatly, is I've hung up the plans which Sarah Marchant has provided to me for the Everett Street improvement. And I know this is not all approved yet, and I believe they have a zoning meeting coming up with you folks, but the plan is to connect the rail trail down Everett Street, across a raised crosswalk to the canal, and then there'll be a new pedestrian bridge across the canal. So if we'd get in first, we would make all of our tie-ins, water, sewer, gas, in Everett Street. Likely, the city will require or request that we build the sidewalk along Everett Street, so we would end up doing that piece of it that'll allow the city's grant to be used in other places, and we'd end up building the sidewalk, I'm sure, along there. And so at the same time that the city's improving Everett Street, we would be improving our whole property and doing away with a vacant lot that has other issues such as abandoned cars, and there's some drainage issues in that lot and just other issues. So we'd be cleaning up all of that for the city. I've already been working with the Community Development Office. We can continue to work with them and make sure that our project was moving along at the same time theirs was, and we didn't hold each other up. The other pictures I've put up here is 17 Lovell Street. This was a project we did 10 years ago. It is a condominium community. We still own 4 units of the 20. But it's a great example of a fairly large building. It's a half-acre lot. It has 21 units on it, so it's more units than we're projecting here. They are senior. But it's a great example of, with the right landscaping and an irrigation system and the right plantings, you can create an inner city lot that has a really nice appeal to it, and over 10 years later, it still looks fairly brand new down there. So we're projecting we'd build a very similar building to that one in this location, and it would provide some quality housing. I won't repeat all of the things, obviously, we wrote in our application. Again, just to stress, it does clean up a vacant lot. The city has done a great job with the park right down the street, so now you'd have the park, you'd have the Everett Street connection to the Mines Falls. We would clean up this lot, so it's going to greatly enhance the whole neighborhood. Gate City Fence is doing some pretty good things with their property. That's obviously a growing business, but they're doing a good job cleaning up their property, and we would kind of tie into that as well. It adds tax base to the city tax base, obviously. It provides much-needed housing downtown, and it starts to modernize some of the more antiquated housing in the city. That, in a nutshell, is the presentation. I'll answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Doloff? If not, I have a question. When you had mentioned about the abandoned cars when I looked at the site, is that, there were quite a few kind of stacked up. Is that on the neighboring property, or is that on this, or somewhere in between?
I'm not exactly sure, and I've traded phone calls with Rob at the enforcement department. We need to really survey the lot so we know exactly what's ours, because I'm not sure if those cars are on our lot or they're not. I certainly don't want to tow things right now that aren't definitely on our lot. But I think some of those may be partially or on our lot, so.
Yeah. But I think at any rate, if this were developed one way or the other, that would be all cleaned up.
Oh, that would be gone. I mean, there would be spots for our tenants, and there would be our tenants only, and all of that would be gone. Yeah, it would now be a very useful lot as opposed to an abandoned lot.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
That's more a question of Mr. Fox. So there's actually 4 lots of record here, right?
Yes.
Right, so there's no merging or anything, it's just they own all the 4 lots?
Well, they would have to merge them all, should this be approved, and then they would have to go to the planning board. That would be a condition of the planning board approval as well.
Right,
They'd have
okay.
to be all combined.
Right.
Otherwise, each lot would have to meet its own setbacks and its own density and its own open space.
Right, because I was just reviewing the GIS map, and I noticed
Yeah.
there was, what was down there, and of course, I took a look down there, and I was just trying to figure out where the kind of lots were.
Yeah, they'd all have to be
Okay.
combined.
We would have to combine them too for financing and so
Yeah.
forth, so it would all be
Much-
combined into one
much
lot.
easier to do that.
Mr. Shaw?
In your application, you noted about, other multifamily units in this area. Do you have any more details you can share as far as any sort of, assessment of the other properties more, with some more specifics or any data, basically?
Well, we actually started, my business partner started to make a list, but the list was very lengthy, and the density was all well above, what we're actually projecting here. I mean, we could provide you a list, but it's a long list, just because of the nature of the neighborhood.
Well, actually, I want to clarify, or at least make sure I understand your point. Are you saying that there's many other properties that will be at a greater density than what you're proposing? Or, I'm just trying to get to how much denser usage or not is this proposal than, generally other surrounding properties?
Sure, and if I could, I'll, Steve, do you mind to come up and just explain that?
Good evening. My name's Stephen Valley. I'm the Vice President of Sequel Development and Management, Inc. I did a little bit of a list going here in the surrounding neighborhoods, and essentially what I did was I broke it down to square foot of land area per unit. For example, 24 to 28 Ledge Street has 6 units, and it's basically 476.66 square feet per unit of land area. 30 Ledge Street is 7 units, and it's 422.14 square feet of land area per unit. 12 to 14 Stevens Street, that's only 2 units, however, it's 1,462 square feet per unit. A few others here, you've got 80 Ledge at 499 square feet per unit. And 8 to 10 Stevens Street is another 2 units at 1,394 square feet per unit. So, believe it or not, I didn't do the math on our own project, but essentially, there's a lot of density down there on little areas of land area.
All right, I guess I might just try to do the quick calculation myself unless you get a chance to, just because I appreciate those numbers, but it'd be good to, I'm still not sure where you guys even come anywhere in that distribution.
Well, we're at, if you round this up to 18,000 square feet at 9 units, we're at 2,000 square feet per lot.
Okay.
Our actual number is
18 or 1,900.
17,845, so if you round it up to
So
18,000.
it's close to 2,000.
It's
under
close to
2,000.
2,000.
So that, at least, you gave us, I think 5 examples here of, something that are 4X's dense and at least another, 30 or whatever percentage. Okay. That's helpful to me because I definitely don't, I'm not that inclined, or maybe, I know a lot of times the board isn't that inclined to do something that's significantly different than what's going on already, or at least it helps us to judge kind of how different this is. So that's helpful information. Thank you.
We'd be glad to submit that list to you, for your records afterwards as well. And the other point I wanted to make, and I did forget to make in my presentation, is our proximity to the new footbridge into Mines Falls and our proximity to the other park. Our tenants would be very easily very able to use the city open space as opposed to having open space on our own property, because it's right there, it's on our doorstep. So we'd be making really good use of the city's open space that you've done a great job providing. And still, as Steve just showed, our density per acre is lower than a lot of what exists in that neighborhood.
Thank you.
Mr. Boucher?
You had testified earlier that you had a similar project on Lovewell, and you testified you just have 4 units left. And again, it doesn't really have a bearing on my decision. It's just curious as to where you're going with it. Is there a plan in the future to turn these into condos and sell them as units? Or is it strictly, because it tells me kind of how you might build something, right? Not that it's our purview, but what your idea is.
No, I understand what you're asking, yeah. No, Level Street was built as condos from the get-go, so we put interior features that would lead people to buy them.
Right.
The apartments are being built as apartments, so they won't, we're not gonna put laundry machines in each unit. We're not gonna do some other things you might do if it was gonna be a condo. It's gonna be a common laundry room, and it's gonna be built as an apartment building. It's gonna have a central heating system as opposed to a heating system in each unit. So no, I don't see it being condo down the road. We certainly wouldn't, and I don't see somebody buying it from us and condoing it. It's really not gonna be structured for that.
All right, so, okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Yeah, the physical construction wouldn't lend itself to
Right.
condoing.
Ms. McKay?
I have a question. You're looking to put 9 units in almost half the square footage that is required. Is there a reason why you're not doing 6 units?
There's a couple of reasons, and the first point I just made, there's a lot of open space and common area right around our property, so it lends itself to going to greater density and allowing people to use the other area. Also, when you construct a multifamily building of this type, 3-story, the base costs are very high, so if you can amortize that over a larger number of units, you can make the units more affordable. To build 6 units, we still have a lot of the same infrastructure costs, but we're only amortizing it over 6. And then, the rents in that part of town don't really get up high enough to cover the cost, which is why you're seeing what you see with folks like Exit 1 with Flatley. They're building high-end apartments because their same base costs are the same, but you have to bring in a much higher rent to make the numbers work. If we can have a few more units per acre, it helps us amortize that base cost over a larger area and keep the rents in a affordable range that somebody could afford in that area.
Okay.
I guess I have a question. It's more an observation. I mean, I used to commute to work to and from, down along Ledge Street. And I've always found that to be a very, congested part of town. That was before the Parkway went in. On one hand, as I remember, I think that was a 4-way stop there before the Parkway went in, and now it's signalized. But, in visiting the site, my experience is it's just a very congested part of town, probably more so now. And, my gut reaction was, like the argument of having open space across the street, or, that's true, but these 2 streets, to me, are pretty tough to navigate or get in. Or Stevens, I guess you'd be coming in and out more on Everett Street than Stevens Avenue. But I was just struggling with the extra high density, in this, closely congested area, and I was trying to make ends meet with that versus, a small overage on the allotted amount. I just wondered if you could help me, be comfortable with the heavier proposed heavier density.
Well, I think your point's well taken. Everett Street would be the main, our parking areas are off of Everett Street, so people would be coming and going on Everett Street. And you're right, it would be, with the new parkway, it'd be fairly easy to come out of there, go down to the lights and get on the parkway for those folks that are commuting to a job somewhere. I think the demographics in this area, you're gonna have, maybe one person in the family working, commuting someplace. You're probably gonna have a lot of, startup families with just one car. We're not gonna have 2 cars per unit, I wouldn't think. There might be some. So I don't think it's gonna add, it's not like building a $300,000 unit where there's gonna definitely be 2 or 3 cars in that unit. There's gonna be maybe 1 car in most of these units, so it's gonna add a little bit of traffic. But again, it's gonna just provide a much higher quality unit for those people that wanna live downtown. And then I think some people wanna live downtown so they can walk to a lot of facilities, and those are the people, that won't have a second car, or maybe not even have a first car. So it gives them easy access into the city from that location. But I think with a new parkway, that's probably relieved a lot of the congestion on Ledge Street, and it gives people an easy way out without going up Ledge Street by the school in the morning and so forth, and school's in session. They have that second egress.
Okay, yeah, I mean, clearly the idea of cleaning up that corner is an exciting element of this proposal, and the work you've done in other places, demonstrates that is what happens, and I weigh that against the struggle of the high density, but thank you for helping me with my question.
Okay, and which is clearly why I showed the other project, because that, Chestnut Street's also can be a very dense, heavily traveled road, and with the right landscaping and the right maintenance and so forth, can look very nice and just be a great part of the community. And I think that building was just an excellent addition to that part of the community. And now there's a second one down in that neighborhood, very similar, Salmon Brook Falls, I think is the name of it. That was recently built too. So,
All right, thank you. We have another question from Mr. Boucher.
Just talking about Everett Street, obviously it's a dead end. If my memory serves right across the street on Everett Street from your project is actually Gate City Fence's storage yard, I'll call it, with a narrow kind of a drive for a good length of it. Then it kind of just opens up in the back a little bit. But from what I recall, that's what I see. And then the property adjoining to it, there's a lot of parking there for the buildings that are a little further away. Is that correct?
well, Gate City's been doing some work on their lot here, and I'm not sure exactly how far they're going, but they've added a fence and they've cleaned up this corner, and I think they're getting a little pressure from the city to clean up some of this. And then that intersection's gonna change quite a bit once the community grant goes through, and you're gonna see the raised sidewalk, and this whole intersection's gonna be cleaned up dramatically.
Right.
So they're gonna have to pull their whole efforts back within their fence and within their property, because they're just gonna have to once the city starts cleaning up Everett Street and redoing it. So that'll clean that up dramatically.
Any other questions for Mr. Doloff? I think we're all set for now. Folks, I know you came in a few minutes after we got going. This is the zoning board, is that what you're here for? Okay. So what we're hearing now is it's a public hearing, and we're hearing for anyone who's in favor or has other testimony in favor of this. Okay, well, hang in there, because we'll hear from all the folks in favor first. Is there anybody else to speak in favor? You probably all together, so, all right. Well, if one or you or two would like to come to the microphone, we just ask you give us your name and address. You can both come at the same time. You just give us both your names and addresses and let us know what's on your mind.
My name is Eric Finn. I've owned the property at 12 and 14 Stevens Ave since 2001.
Okay. And I'm sorry, the name again?
Eric Finn.
Finn,
F-I-C, F-I-N-N.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Finn. Yes, what's on your mind with this application?
The neighborhood, the gist of it, the neighborhood, at least the Stevens Ave and Everett Street part of it, has all claimed to be against this. I have signatures from just about everybody on both streets that are against it. It's not so much against building on it, because I applaud these people for actually trying to do something with that land. It's the size of the unit, the 9 units. If it was a smaller 2, 4 type unit, that would be one thing. 9, hitting back on some of the conversation earlier, the congestion is extreme congestion. There is no parking, at least on the Stevens Ave side of it. Cars double park, 2 cars in one spot in the open land that's kind of attached to where they've purchased. Winter is awful. There's a lot of children that don't leave that street. That's where they play, is in that area. There is no real other place outside of the park, which would entail taking your children there to do that as opposed to letting them play in front. There's a fear of the property value of the owners of the houses on that street going down. The owner of Everett Street is on a plane right now. He wanted to be here to talk on this point too.
Okay, if you had some signatures there, would you mind, could I trouble you to bring that up to Mr. Shaw? We'd just like to have that for the record. And he'll grab that for you. Thank you very much. Okay, so in summary, you're just to clarify, by right, anybody could develop that lot with 5. I mean, typically it's like 5.1 something, but 5 units would be by right. So they could just pull a permit. They're here tonight because they're asking for 9, which is in excess of that,
Yes,
and that
I'm
kind of
okay
kicks
with
in this.
whatever the statute allows. Like,
Mhm.
it's in excess of that is just adding to the pressure of what is going on in that neighborhood. It's one thing if you're building this and then you're going to your nice new home somewhere else and you're not there to have to deal with the situation after the fact. However, we are the ones that are there that are gonna have to deal with
Yeah.
the congestion.
All right, let's just see if does anybody have any questions for Mr. Finn? Mr. Boucher has a question for you.
So just to clarify, are you, the children at play, is it Stevens Street or is it Everett Street that they make there?
Stevens Ave and Everett Street.
Everett Street, okay.
This Stevens Street in particular, where as I said, I bought this house in 2001, and I'm sure you guys know that it has not been a very good section area of the Ledge Street area. However, in the last 5 or 6 years, it has got cleaned up completely. That Stevens Ave is now loaded with good families, good children, like, all the trouble has been out of that area. And part of the fear with myself and some of the other residents is that a large unit like that is gonna open the door to crime. More, you obviously know the opiate epidemic in the city. Like, those type of possibilities are gonna be much greater in a large unit when our children will be out there playing on the other side of it.
All right, any other questions for Mr.? I guess I haven't spent much time going through there since the parkways come in. In general, is, the traffic, is it pre and post the parkway? You've been there pre and post. What's?
It's
I'm-
ridiculous.
It isn't good.
So
And
it's gotten heavier?
If there's ever any type of incident on the highway, it makes a 3-minute drive from Route 3 down that road a 2-hour drive to get from Route 3 to Gate City Fence.
Because I guess I was thinking that, the lights versus the 4-way stop might be overall moving traffic better, but,
No, that makes it harder.
It's made it actually more difficult
More
because it's
difficult.
increased the volume of cars that are coming through that way.
okay. Well,
And
thank you for
the light-
clarifying
The
that.
lights stick for a while, so it just, one direction or the other or both, it starts backing up and it's a
Okay.
constant flow.
Thank you for that. Any other questions for the Finns? And I'm sorry, what was your name, ma'am?
This is my wife, Paula.
Paula. Oh, so it's Eric and Paula Finn. All right, well, thanks for coming tonight. You could have a seat.
Thank you.
And Mr. Doloff, if you'd like to, you're welcome to address what we've heard in any fashion, if you
Sure,
wish.
sure.
Yeah, go right ahead.
The kids playing on Everett Street, no matter what, whether it's us or the city, Everett Street's gonna get redone and it's gonna get built. So, I mean, everybody's gonna have to move off the street. And my understanding is, once it's done, it's gonna have all new lighting, it's gonna have all new asphalt. There's gonna be a striped section for bikes to connect from the rail trail again over to Mines Falls. And it's going to be it's designed to be very much a pedestrian zone. So I think once it's rebuilt, then the children should be very safe out there, and it should be a great street for them to be on. And there should be a lot of adults walking, riding, exercising out there. So that's all going to be positive. If we do our project and we do the sidewalks and then we provide good lighting around our building, it just helps enhance what the city's doing. If it would help for us to put a stockade fence on the Stevens Street, I don't think we're going to impact Stevens Street much. We could certainly put a stockade fence on the back of our property to create more of a barrier or separation, or we could create a barrier with landscaping if that helped. We're open to some ideas. We are providing all of our own parking. We are providing parking that meets the city's requirements. It exceeds it by a half a space. And then, of course, we'll restrict the parking to only our residents. And I do fully aware that you have to look at the building in perpetuity beyond our ownership. But it'll be well run. And the opioid epidemic is a little hard to address because it can be any apartment in the city. It doesn't matter if it's this neighborhood or, again, if it's Exit 1. I've been using that as an example. You have the same problems down there. And I have to strongly believe that our improvements here are going to help the value of all the neighbors. I mean, it's just got to bring the value of that neighborhood up to clean up that vacant lot and clean up the issues there. So, I mean, I very much appreciate what the Finns are saying, and we'd be glad to work with them to create some buffers in the back there and make sure that our density is not negatively impacting them in any way. And we can certainly talk about ways to buffer that.
All right, well, thank you for that. Any questions for Mr. Doloff? All right, thanks. Per our rules, Mr. Finn, you have the right to address the testimony that you've heard from Mr. Doloff, or, you could rest with what you stated already. Just wanted to let you know that you have a right to speak specifically to Mr. Doloff's testimony there. So again, this is Paula Finn at the microphone. And if
I
you could
have a
just
lot
address
of
us,
people.
Ms. Finn, if you could just
Okay.
address us, thanks.
I have a lot of people that are against this because we have just cleaned up our street.
Okay.
We are worried about crime rates. We are worried about drugs. We are worried about, what is going to happen on our streets because we just cleaned it, and we consider us as a family. We all watch out for each other.
Mhm.
Bringing a 9 family in is going to make that a lot harder on us. Nobody's gonna be there every day to see what goes on. So Everett Street and Stevens Ave, there's no keeping just one side to one street. Everett Street does have people that come down Stevens Ave and parks on our side. The parking is ridiculous, and everybody is afraid that the crime rate's gonna go up.
All right, thank you. Any questions on Mr. Boucher?
Just a couple of things. Just a question. Do you have restricted parking, or is that an area where you can get a permit to park overnight? where you are?
There's no permits to park overnight.
All right, so is this problem, and I'm just trying to understand the parking problem, is that really during the day, or is that all overnight and they're just not?
All the time.
So they're not enforcing it?
Right.
Okay, all right. The other question I have for you is, per testimony, as you understand, they have a right to build a 5-unit building. So I'm more concerned right now about, the impact on you, whether or not the board decides to go forward or not. Somebody can build or could build here. So let's talk about your property and what exists. Right now, they're proposing a parking lot, if you can see, parking behind your home.
Right.
Is there something that, we're talking about Stevens Street, and the applicant has generously offered, obviously, to buffer some of his project. He's been in front of us before, and he's done that, and it's I don't say it's typical, but again, applicants are very cognizant of the neighborhoods they're going into and the impact. So the impact on you would be where he has a parking area. Is there something there, let's say, regardless of what happens, this could be parking for a new home. is there something there that you would say, hey, that would be an issue, and I would need to have some type of buffer fence or something?
Right.
So,
Right. There would have to be some kind of fencing going
okay,
on. Just because we have 4 dogs, we've already had problems with kids teasing our dogs. I have one dog that a kid teased so much that we are now working with him because the kid teased him so much. So we're trying to, we're just trying to make it so the kids have a place to play, a safe place to play, and not have so many cars coming in and out. And Everett Street said the same thing. They said they do not want cars coming in and out because of the fact that their kids play right outside too. And they don't have a backyard, Our backyards, all of our backyards are very small, so the streets are really the only place that the kids can play on.
I think, just a comment, that unfortunately, whether it's this project or an improved project, there's gonna be traffic on that street.
Right.
With the development of this. And I can understand, the concerns, because it's a dead end, right? And you would assume that it's all good to go, right?
Right.
But obviously, there's gonna be some changes there, and as you know, there's gonna be a huge improvement there, and, what we're promoting is a lot of different types of transportation, right? By foot, by bike, so I think you're gonna see Everett Street, grow in pedestrian traffic. So there's gonna be a change, but like you said, unfortunately, sometimes that's the only place that people have, so.
Right, right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, that we understood from you that you definitely want, regardless of what happens, a buffer, and I think that would go a long way to give you a little more privacy too.
And the other thing that we're worried about is last time they were working behind our house, our cellar the rocks started coming loose. So with all of that work going by with trucks and all of that, we're afraid our foundation might not be able to handle that much.
So what I would suggest to you, in general, would be, no matter where this goes, whatever happens to this lot, that it would have to go in front of the planning board. That would be a great time for you to present yourself and talk to them, because they're really looking at the project. So we're only here to look at the zoning. They're there to actually look at how is this project gonna look and function, and what are they building. So that would be where you would wanna address that,
Okay.
okay? But your concern is valid. All right, I'm all set.
Any other questions for Ms. Finn? I think we're all set. You could have a seat, and I'll close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Thoughts on the case? Anybody like to jump in first? I guess I'll jump in first if nobody does. First of all, I appreciate the testimony from the Finns. I guess my feeling of, say, of the overage of 9, I mean, in terms of like, the crime or the opioid, I don't feel that's much of an issue. I don't feel that if it were, 5, 6, or 9, that doesn't make any difference to me. But what's encouraging is the potential development of this lot, and it's encouraging to hear how this area of town, the neighborhoods kind of come together. I don't go down there that much, and that's all encouraging to me. It's all going in the right direction. I guess I'm still struggling with, the added density, because especially with the bike trail gonna be coming through this way, I almost think that a potential fence here might be, maybe that's could be stipulated, but my thought is, I mean, I grew up in a very tight neighborhood where there wasn't much space and everybody played on the dead-end streets, and it kind of seems like that's what's going on in this neighborhood, and the potential added density, I think, is impactful to that, especially with this, the added bridge going in and the expected pedestrian foot traffic coming here, where the density will be going in and out. So I guess I'm not at all fast against the overage request of 9, but I'm struggling. I guess I'd be looking for somebody to persuade me that that's okay, and so that's where I'm at the moment. So I'm seeking the counsel of 3 other opinions on the matter here. Ms. McKay?
I guess that's my turn to jump in. I utilize that area a lot, and the Finns were correct when they said the lights make it more, it inhibits rather than helps, because you wait a lot longer. It's very busy, and when you come up and you want to turn onto Pine Street, you could be there forever. What worries me is all that extra traffic. The idea of going so far over what's allowable is difficult for me, versus the idea of cleaning up the area, making it look better, and in some ways making it safer. It's really a huge conundrum. Also, with the parking, I guess there would have to be a fence, because the Finns did mention, but nobody really talked about snow removal. And where are they gonna push that snow, and how much area do they have? And if there's a fence, I can't, and I'm a visual person, so I would have to, I can't visualize where and how the fence would look, and would it inhibit visibility if you were on a bike or in a vehicle trying to navigate? I don't know, and it's just a concern. So for me, someone's gonna have to convince me that 9 units in such a tall building is beneficial to the area, because I'm not seeing it right now.
All right, thank you for your thoughts. From the other side of the table, somebody wanna, Mr. Boucher?
Sure. I'll just tell you a couple of thoughts that are going through my mind. The project to me doesn't hinge on the fencing, it's just, I just want to get that out there, because the applicant talked about Stevens Avenue, and I just wanted to make sure that, along Stevens Avenue, I just wanted to make sure that when we got to this point, that, that anybody, that it would maybe be the whole length of the backside of the property that would be looking to get some type of buffer, so. We heard testimony of some of the examples of density, right? So this project is certainly not the tightest density that we see in that area, existing area. Also, I'm so familiar with that area because I worked up near exit 5 on Simon Street for 13 years, and that was my main way into, to get to different communities and stuff. So, it was a major road, and it still is today, right? The Parkway was supposed to relieve some of that, and I do agree that the light sometimes, you wait. But I guess, how do you measure improvement? I think we do it all differently. But I'd like to note that, when we talk about density and, and bringing in 4 extra families, we remember what was on the corner, Pine and Ledge Street, right? There was a pretty big building there, right?
Oh, Nashua Wholesale Tire was there.
No,
I moved
Pine and Ledge, right? The building that came down, that's now a park,
Yeah.
right? There was a lot of units in there, right?
Yeah.
So that was removed and not replaced. I mean, we didn't see a project go there. So, it's one of those things. I'm not gonna disagree. I will agree with the Finns that it is a congested area. But I guess I'm trying to relate that to, this project, the benefits of what this will bring, and what the applicant brings, and the applicant, certainly has a track record. Doesn't mean the applicant's gonna hold on to the property forever. We can never, know that, but they have a track record of projects, throughout the city. But not just, I'm not basing myself, decision on that. I'm just looking at the fact that, what other densities do we see there, compared to this project? And what was, again, something was there previously. It's not there today, but something was there previously that was higher density, that had more people than what we're going to add in here, I guess is what I'm saying, if you could follow me with that. So I'm just kind of comparing that. It's interesting that, I guess, like I said, I didn't know that they were gonna, the work that's gonna be done on Everett Street and the rail trail. I heard something, but I didn't know, exactly what the plans. I'm sure we'll see it, but no matter if this gets done or not, the city is doing this project, right? So I don't know if you can prevent, the foot traffic or the people that may or may not use that footbridge. And I guess that will be, will be seen in the future and what that is. So I think the best thing for me is, when I look at this, is like, what do they bring into the lot? What kind of improvements can be made to the lot? Is it bringing it to a better state than what it was? And then again, looking at what they're asking for in the density, what is in the surrounding area? So to me, it's not more impactful. It's obviously impactful to the abutters, more impactful because there's been nothing there. And again, everybody measures what that is differently, right? So an open lot for some is way better, but then that brings other issues, right? With, we heard about abandoned cars and cars that have been left there, and then a developed lot now is somebody's, looking at that and maintaining that property. Because obviously, Sequel Development's not gonna spend all this money for rental units to have it not be able to be rented, right? To bring in what they want for the project, right? To have a successful business to rent nice units, so, for the area. So right now, and just, throw that out there as the thoughts that I have. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Shaw?
I guess I'm really kind of on the fence or struggling with this, in that there's evidence of greater density on some of the other surrounding properties to varying degrees, and yet this request is also for a significant overage as well. I appreciate that some of the kind of economics and the feasibility of the overhead of a project like this, and the benefits of doing 9 versus 6, let's say, or even 5, are quite valid. But there is an intensity here too. So I'm truly kind of really see there's the benefits of getting this redeveloped, of I think improving the overall neighborhood. There might be ultimately some balance between if there's any negative detriment, I think, from kind of property values of surrounding parcels because of this larger structure, would, I think, potentially also be offset by the fact that these 4 lots are being redeveloped, will be now in good shape and not be some sort of blight on the surrounding area. So I think that part could be maybe, I look at it as maybe kind of net neutral, but it's still hard for me to say with any certainty there. I do think the fencing idea, I think that's almost probably a no-brainer in terms of something that should happen. And I think as far as, some of the concerns about snow removal, yeah, we didn't talk about it, but it does appear that there's some of the kind of islands or parts on the end or between the street and the parking that I imagine would be viable for collecting snow. So I'm not too concerned about that. But it's really just kind of comes down to this, is this request kind of an overreach or too great of an intensity, even though it's not the only property that's of this density or greater. So that's where I'm struggling.
I kind of go along with Mr. Shaw and Mr. Boucher. I'm trying to weigh 12 people versus 18. What if there's children? Because I'm just saying 2 per unit. And how much of an impact would that be? Is the degree of impact, going to be that much noticeable or not noticeable? I don't know. And economics aside, and ownership and development aside, we're stipulating it's a company with a track record that, is stellar. So that's irregardless. That's kind of off the table for me, because 10 years from now, they may not be the owner. So I can't factor that in. I think what I have to factor in is the actual structure itself. And I say to myself, if there's 12, and who knows, what if each unit has 2 children, 3 children? How much more is it going to grow? What kind of impact is it going to be on the schools and everything else there? And would a lesser impact be more appealing than the greater impact? And that's where I'm stuck, because I can't rationalize for myself why it should be so far over. And that's right where I think I'm at the same juggernaut, the same sticky wicket that you are, Mr. Shaw.
I guess I'll just throw a little more in. If we were dealing with like hard numbers, and those hard numbers said the lot would never reasonably get redeveloped, say at 6, you'd have to have 9 to make any redevelopment feasible. If there was such a calculus, that would be very, very moving to me. And what's in my head is, I don't really know that calculus. But if the calculus is such that somebody says, yeah, you could redevelop that lot with 6 and not 9, then I guess I'd be like, I'd struggle to find the rationale to have overage of 9. Just another thought I wanted to get out there. I wanted to say that the act of redevelopment of this lot is a really positive thing for the neighborhood, and I hate for that to get lost, but I'm not sure if 9 is needed to do that. I don't know.
See, I agree, I concur. I don't know if it's 9. Nobody gave me a number. You're right. There's no data, there's no figure, there's no ratio that says this equals this and this equals this. I'm just stuck. Why we have to go so far over and above the square footage that's allowable. That's difficult for me, I understand. But I don't understand why it wouldn't be just, obviously not as economical or beneficial for the owner at 6 as it would at 9. But then again, now I'm looking at cost and profit versus impact and livability.
Well, I guess maybe I'll turn to my left. I didn't know if you had anything to add to our dilemma to help out, if you had any thoughts on the matter. If we're open to hear from the professional. If you have anything to add, and nothing to add is fine as well.
Well, me and my role here is not really to provide an opinion on whether or not I think the project is a good one or a not so good one. I can attest that the developer is like you said, a stellar developer, and we've had some very high quality projects that they've done. So we're not worried about that at all. You know, the board's really got to determine really that the code is what the code is. This zone is an RC zone, whether it's Stevens and Everett Street, or it's 3 blocks away, or a quarter mile south, east or west. This is what this zone allows, 3,484 square feet per dwelling unit. That's what this allows by right. You know, they have a lot that's just under 18,000 square feet, so about 5 units are allowed by right, and they're asking for the 9 units. You know, it's probably 3, 3, and 3 is my guess, or something like that. 3 stories, probably 3 per unit, 3 per story. So, you know, it's a little bit over, and with that would be a little bit extra traffic, demand on city services, buses for children, you know, all that. But as the developer said, there are some opportunities for some, you know, open space that can be utilized just off-site from their project with the pedestrian bridge that will be going in, the park right next door, there's a school down the street, there's the rail trail. So there are a lot of opportunities for not only children, but for adults and teenagers to, you know, recreate in. So with the open space, that's one of the things with open space is, you know, the density gives space for people who live on the project to enjoy that project. This is something where the setbacks are all met, the open space is met, the parking is met, the open space is shy. However, there are some spaces nearby that can be utilized. You know, they mentioned property values. I mean, we don't have any hard data or evidence that shows that they'll be devalued. Generally, and I mean, I'm not a real estate appraiser or broker or anything, but generally new construction is usually a benefit to the nearby properties because it's brand new, nice construction and it looks good, and that generally rises values. So as far as the drugs and crime, that can be anywhere. You know, I don't think us as staff has any real comment on that. But you know, the biggest thing is the land area. That's what they're here for. They're not here to talk about really traffic. They meet their parking. It's just the amount of units per that acreage. And the board will have to determine whether that 3.7 units is not worth the granting of this variance. So that's really what we're talking about here.
All right, thank you for that. Any other thoughts, Mr. Shaw?
Yeah, and, you know, I think the easy thing to do is approve 6, knowing that it's already supports greater than 5, and that would be a fairly low incursion. Now, if I just kind of, in 6 and 9 kind of work together as far as some comparisons, one thing I don't think it's in the, I don't believe it's in the application. I don't remember if it was stated, unless, and maybe we have something that's notes it, but the number of bedrooms in each unit. I don't know if, okay, it looks like Mr. Falk is indicating that
He
too.
said
Okay.
2.
All right, so I didn't pick up on that. It's possible that maybe they develop it, we approve 6, they develop it with 6, but they're now 3-bedroom units, which I don't know if that's, or if that would be beyond, if we felt that testimony was for 2. And trying to get at, it's possible there could be similar intensity of population and usage with less units, but bigger units. That might not have the same calculus as far as the rental income and the benefits to go to 3-bedroom units versus 2-bedroom. But I know there isn't a great inventory of 3-bedroom units throughout the city, from what I understand. So
Costs more a month.
yeah, right. So a lot of times they're just hard to afford when it's already expensive even for a 2-bedroom. So I feel like maybe there's something there that you know, kind of goes to, could there be that much difference between 6 and 9? Maybe, maybe not, but I think it's getting, again, hard for us to really know where that falls. But I guess I feel like at least 3 of us, maybe you're somewhere there too, but have this kind of, we like the idea of the redevelopment, we like the benefit that bringing to the area. It's just ultimately a concern about the intensity. And I think it is great arguments as far as the open space, and there is enough parking and all those things. So even that part of things, not so bad. But if I just try to go back to kind of the point, code says this is how much a given area of property in a given zone is supposed to have going on, we're looking at something greatly different. Now, again, if nobody else had properties in this area that were exceeding that, I think this would be a really easy denial for me. But the fact that there's definitely other multifamily unit properties, and much like a lot of these highly developed areas within the city, the code for these various zoning districts isn't that uniform across what's existing because of things predating zoning and everything else and zoning law changing. But the reality is, there is this mix, but is it enough that kind of weighs things that we're not doing something that's kind of beyond the intent, the spirit and intent of the ordinance? And I guess I'm still struggling to see that I can really justify that, or that the hardship is there that keeps from developing this property in some other manner feasible. So I guess I'm not sure that I can ultimately support it in that regard. There's a lot of things I like about this, but I feel like it's one thing to push it to 6, maybe even 7 might be, that's kind of an odd number in something like this, but even there, I'm not sure that's that much benefit, and why go that much further. But since it's 5 and a fraction, 6 seems reasonable. So I guess I'm kind of settling out there, but I'm not totally set, because I just feel like there's a tricky balance.
I agree. I can see the rationale for 6, and I just don't understand why we have to go almost twice over what the ordinance says. And if we were to just look at the ordinance and not look at anything else, then there has to be justification for why there's such a vast overage. And that is not yet what I've heard, that justification for why it needs to go so far over. I understand it's more cost-effective to do 9. That makes logical common sense. But because it's cost-effective doesn't make it right, and doesn't make it something that I can support. I can support 6. I can't support 9.
I mean, the only thing I'd say to that, and the applicant, I think, point was that to make the rents affordable, and
there's
because
that.
of the overhead costs when you're going into this kind of a project. So to me, that carries a lot of weight. It's hard to, without all the hard numbers and all, that's where things get very hard to discern. So I believe that their analysis tells them that perhaps they will not be able to price themselves in the market to do the kind of project they want to do without going to this number of units. And so that's why they've made this request. And I do appreciate that, but I don't know that there aren't still other alternatives that would ultimately be available regarding these lots. So, yeah, so I think there was justification. It's hard to know that ultimately the market would bear the rental rates that would have to be done on a 6 versus 9 unit and that kind of thing.
We don't have all those numbers. It's
Right.
hard to make that determination when we have so many what-ifs, or I don't knows.
Mr. Chair.
You guys do whatever you're gonna do whatever you're gonna do, but, I'm hearing a lot of talk and discussion versus what their applicant is requesting versus what the board seems to be comfortable with. And, between 6 units or 9 units, just a thought of maybe a tabling to have them
I'd
come up
love
with a
that.
little bit more of a study to
really do.
indicate a better density study of what's in that area and what the rents are in that area, if that can be determined. And, maybe that could help with determining what exactly is in this area, because that's one of the biggest things is, when you're looking at the density of this, most of the existing housing stock in this area is probably older than all of us in this room. It's all, I think so, yeah. It's probably 80 to 100 years old, so there's not a lot of new development over here. So a lot of this was built prior to our existing zoning code. So that was a different era back then, when everybody was building multifamilies for people to work in the mill buildings. They wanted the density because that's where people worked. They worked right, they could walk down to all the mill buildings and work. So this is kind of what that neighborhood has stood for. High density, multifamily, smaller lots, people close to the clock tower building when that was in operation, the Red Manufacturing Ball Company in Chestnut Street. There's a lot of large, big mill buildings. So that's kind of the character of this area. That's why it's built this. So if we had a study, I think, that would show what the density is in the area, maybe that will help to determine how this is in character with the neighborhood, with the number that they want.
I guess
Just a
I'll,
thought.
to Mr. Falk's suggestion, I make a motion to reopen the public hearing, to have Mr. Doloff, who's been, listening to our struggle here. So I make a motion to reopen the public hearing, as seconded by Mr. Shaw. Show of hands in favor. So, Mr. Doloff, if you've been following along with our struggle, and we
Yes.
have a suggestion of more quantification of density in the neighborhood. Thoughts on the matter?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for reopening the public discussion. My first thought is I wanted to just briefly address the economics of developing this lot and why the 6 versus the 3. One of the big factors in Nashua, when you develop a lot, you have to deal with all of your stormwater runoff on site. So a lot like this one, whether we have 6 units or 3 units, we have the same roof area, we have virtually the same pavement area, and we have no green space. So we're gonna have to build what they call infiltration basins, and they're all gonna have to be structural infiltration basins. They're gonna have to be under the parking lots. They have to be under the parking lots, and that's where the rainwater from the roof's gonna run. It's all gonna run under the parking lot. And those infiltration basins are much more expensive than if you built one just in a field and, you put it under the grass. So whether you have 6 or 9, we have to build the same amount of infiltration basins. The other issue with this lot is it's an extremely long lot, and all the work we do along the road has to be granite curbing. So again, whether it's 6 or 9, we're developing a very long lot, and it requires us to do a lot of granite curbing to meet the city's requirements. The other factor is this will be a large enough building that it'll be a fire sprinkler protected building, and it'll have all modern CO detection, fire detection, et cetera. The cost to bring the water line in and build that fire protection system, again, whether it's 6 or 9 units, all the work in the street and all the work bringing it in is the same cost, because it's going to be virtually the same size pipe. Granted, you'll be 3 less units. We're putting sprinklers in. It'll be 6 versus 9. But again, that's a cost that only gets amortized over 6 versus 9. So there's some costs to developing this lot that are, much higher than if there was some more green space, and that just don't change by reducing the number of units, because we can't shrink the building up that much. We just take a floor off, and but you still have the same roof area, you have the same amount of rainwater, same amount of storm runoff. Having the 9 units gives us a little more latitude. We can do the buffering, we can do a fence, we can irrigate the exterior of the property, we can put a little more into the siding and the exterior appearances, and you just do more to bring up the appearance of the building, which then helps the neighborhood. It does new construction between what the city does on Everett Street and what we do in this lot is going to bring the values in that area up. It can't help but bring the values up. In closing, I understand your struggle between the 6 and 9, and I appreciate Mr. Falk's idea of tabling. I guess we would be open to a 6 appeal. We could always come back and appeal it. Either way, we'd have 30 days to deal with it. But I just wanted to, if I could, address the economics of developing the lot. It is not an easy lot because it's not a simple square. There's a lot of road frontage on this lot. So from a developer's perspective, it's not the ideal lot to develop. You'd rather have the required road frontage, but not so much that you're building all this sidewalk and all of this curbing and so forth. And And, you know, the planning will require that we do the sidewalk at least the length of our property, and likely they'll have us bring it all the way to the rail trail. And that's usually what they do. So, so those are some of the economic factors we're looking at, and we realize we're going to be faced, and it just allows us to do a little better job having the extra few units there.
Thank you. Were you going to speak? Yep, come on up.
Stephen Valier from Sequel Development. Have here my, granted it's handwritten, my list of the densities of the surrounding neighborhoods with the addresses and stuff. It is handwritten, but I'd be happy to provide it to you. We're, out of 46 units that we surveyed, the average per unit in that, with the addresses that I wrote down here, which is about, looks like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, about 10 addresses. The average per unit of land area is 223.73. Obviously, our project, we're weighing in about 2,000 square feet per unit for the 9. And I've got it all broken down per address, the land area, the density per that address lot, so, I mean, you're welcome to.
One thought I have is typically what makes it easy for people like me to understand is where there's just a simple street map, you know, that has the properties, and then the numbers, your 200 or 2,000 or whatever number is just written, you know, in the areas. So in other words, your presentation says here, we're at 2,000, but this is 200 and 300 and 400, you know, maybe some are higher than 2,000, but a map, is that what I think we're all looking for, that has evidence that says this really is not out of character of the neighborhood, is, you know, that makes it easy for us to understand. While we have the addresses, I tell you, if I had that, I'm just gonna be sitting here and transferring it, you know, onto a map, because you know, when I hear 10 to 12 Stevens Avenue, you know, I have to see where that is in relation to it. So I think what the board is seeking is to have that in a map form, so it's just, you can look at it and get your arms around it, you know, in a minute.
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. It's clearly delineated out. It makes it easier for those of us who are visual learners to actually look and see, because with no disrespect to the project, the costs for irrigation and curbing are fixed, whether it's 6 or 9 units. So that has less of an impact than giving me something that is going to have an impact. Square footage and the density is going to have an impact. So
Got
we
it.
can see it.
So I'll put this in a map.
Yeah, that would be, that's what we're
Okay.
asking for, sure.
Yeah, map with a table,
Yeah.
all associated.
That's
All
it.
right.
Excuse me.
Mr. Boucher, we have a question for you, Mr. Valiant.
We want to know what date certain they're available to do this for.
Yeah.
Oh,
If we're going to
Just-
table this.
We would go to the next meeting and make sure that that's.
Sure.
Okay.
So we could table it to the next meeting or 2 meetings out. You might be in a hurry, you might want to be thorough on it. It's your choice. What is your preference?
I think we could do it by the next meeting, about 2 weeks out.
Yeah, that would be 2
Yeah.
weeks.
Okay, we have to send that we send that package out
Oh.
to the board
Yeah, it has to
next
be.
Monday.
Yeah.
Because we have the holiday on Tuesday, the meeting's the following Tuesday. So, tomorrow's, you know, well, we'd have to have everything in to the office by next Monday. Either that or it'd be the July 25th meeting.
Peter Dolph again. One of the issues we're wrestling with, if we get too far behind the city and the Everett Street improvements, if they do the improvements, then we won't be able to go back into the street for 5 years. So the opportunity to develop this lot will be lost for 5 years. Steve and I will be too old then to do it, so. Is it possible to amend the request to a 6-unit development? And if you approve that tonight, then Steve and I will go back to the drawing board, recalculate our numbers. We may appeal it and come back for the 9, or we may accept the 6 and try and rework it within that. I don't know if that's allowed, if that's possible, but that's just another thought.
Sure, that's a fair request, because I think
That
all
is a
of us
fair
have
request,
stated
yeah.
that we're all comfortable with 6. So, that's a fine request, yeah. Yeah,
All right, so I guess we would make that request, and then we'll amend it to 6 for tonight, and then, it just, with the understanding, once we recalculate the numbers, we might come back to the board and still
Sure.
Go after the 9, and
Yep.
that would allow us time, as opposed to trying to get everything done for Monday.
okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Dolph. You know, the public, Mr. Finn, did you have anything to add to that? The public hearing is open. If you have anything to add, if not, that's fine, too. If you're going to speak, just come back to the mic, because otherwise, we won't get heard again.
Thank
This is
you. Eric Finn.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would add, and not that it makes a huge deal, but the comments that were made about the abandoned cars in this lot,
Uh-huh.
that has not happened in well over 10 years. The
Uh-huh.
lot is surrounded by boulders that are the size of a car, the
Okay.
entire lot. You couldn't put a car in there unless you drove over a boulder.
Okay,
So there isn't a cleanup issue with abandoned cars,
all right,
but that's it, and
all right. Thank you for that.
thank you.
And with that, I'll close the public hearing again and open the public meeting. I think we've all stated we're comfortable with 6. I'm willing, thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think I am, and Mr. Boucher and I had a quick sidebar there, just out of concern to make sure that, because I mean, basically what I believe we just heard was essentially an amendment to their amended request, so that if they do want to come back with the 9, we wouldn't necessarily be hearing the same request again and be into a Fisher v. Dover type of thing. So I think that's where we're okay, but since we were talking about it and believe that was true, I also wanted to just get full concurrence with the board to make sure that if we're going down this path, that we're not kind of closing that option unwittingly. But I think that seems appropriate from what we just noted, and as I mentioned, but if somebody else thinks differently, we should figure that out.
No, I concur.
I concur, too, that 9 would be a completely different application, and the board's open to it.
Yeah, they would have 30 days in which to ask for a rehearing, and tomorrow's day 1.
Would you like to hazard a motion? If not, I'll be happy to do it.
Why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
All right. I'm going to make a motion on behalf of Sequel Development and Management. Again, the address is 1-3 and 5-7 Everett Street, and 2A, 2B, and 4-6 Stevens Avenue. The original request before us tonight was a minimum lot area where 17,519 square feet is existing and 31,363 square feet is required. I don't know if you have a calculator handy, but so as I make this motion, I guess we don't know the square foot required.
It would be about 30,700 or so?
I think it'll be a lot less than that.
No,
with
I'm sorry,
6.
15,000, wait a minute.
It'll be more than that.
No, 6. 6 times 3484. I don't have my,
Yeah, I think I had it up before. It was like about 23.5 or
Okay,
something like
so
that.
we'll say, the most germane element is that we'd be amending the motion to a 6-unit multifamily building with approximately
23,088.
23,088 square feet. The board finds a variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, which is an odd, long-shaped property that fronts on 2 streets. I think the board finds that the 6-unit multifamily building would be within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. I think the board finds it'll likely increase the property values of surrounding parcels to have this long-standing undeveloped lot to be redeveloped into a functional and nice-looking 6-unit multifamily building. I think the board finds it's not contrary to public interest and substantial justice is served. So again, I make a motion to approve a 6-unit multifamily building.
I'll second, but just one actual correction.
Sure.
Would be that it actually fronts 3 streets, It's Stevens, Ledge, and Everett.
Yep. Thank you.
And then the other thing is we want to do a stipulation for the fencing, I think. Everybody, the applicant
Yeah.
had agreed, and
Oh, okay.
and the butters had noted their preference for that, so I think we want to note the.
So I guess I'll amend the
stockade
motion
fence.
to have a privacy fence erected on the, how would I say, the Stevens Avenue side of the property. And also that fence would extend to the backyards of the Stevens Avenue properties that abut this, you know, property. So I amend the motion to include include a privacy fence on the Stevens Avenue side as appropriate for the abutting properties. I don't know if the intent was to have a privacy fence extending from Ledge to Stevens Avenue. I think it was from,
That was actually one of the indications, just to
okay.
help.
So there would be for the length of Stevens Avenue, and then, shall we say, wrapping around to the backyards of the abutting properties on Stevens Avenue.
So it would be on two sides of 8 to 10.
Yes.
Yeah. 8 to 10 would be on the
and
two
back on 12 to
sides.
14.
Back on the 12 to 14 and Stevens Avenue. That would be the,
Resecond that.
so that's the motion.
Wood stockade, so you can't really see through, 6 feet high, not like a split rail.
Yeah, stockade or similar kind of.
Similar style.
privacy
So I
fence.
guess I'll amend the motion to be stockade or non-see-through privacy fence. Second that. So with that amended fence clarification, we have the motion on the table for a 6-unit. That's seconded. Any other discussion on the motion?
So I will support this motion for 6 units that's been changed. Just for the record, just noting that if it had stayed as the original 9, I would have had concerns in regards to reasons for not approving, but because it's down to 6, then I have no problems right now. I have no issues in supporting the motion, let me rephrase that. But I just wanted for a record that I would have had some concerns otherwise. But now that the applicant has requested just 6 units, I have no problems supporting it.
I have no problem supporting 6 at all.
No other discussion on the motion? Show of hands in favor of the motion. So that's unanimous, so it's approved for 6, and good luck going forward.
Still have to go to planning board.
Yep, and, yeah, just for you folks, this was approved for 6, not 9. The next step is that they'll go to the planning board, which is again a public meeting, and you're welcome, and, you know, any interested party is to participate in that as well.
And they should receive notification
Oh, yeah.
for that
They'll
as well.
receive notification.
so.
I don't think it's been applied for yet, so it's probably not gonna be until August or September, probably.
All right, with that, I'll close the public meeting on case number 1, so thanks for coming tonight. And we didn't have any
Thank you,
minutes.
folks.
There are no minutes, and there's the agenda for the next meeting, which has 5 cases.
So we have the meeting agenda for July,
Oh, look at the first case.
Yeah, I know.
And there it is.
I myself don't see any regional impact. I'm looking at the other 3 board members.
No, I see none.
So Mr. Shaw sees no regional impact, Ms. McKay does not, and Mr. Boucher does not, so they see no regional impact. Is there any other business before the board tonight? If not, I make a motion to adjourn. Seconded by Mr. Shaw. All in favor? And so we are off, and thank you, Jimmy, behind the curtain, 7:56 PM.